Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Footballer's Voice. Obviously, we've kicked back the new year, 2022, with the episode last week with Kayla Morrison, the captain of Melbourne Victory. Obviously, a pretty crazy story of her season doing an ACL in round one after a pretty stellar year last year. So if you did enjoy that episode or if you did miss it, go back and check it out. It was a great one. We've got another guest on, and if you remember Kayla's story at the start of last week, we were supposed to have her on last year, and 2 days before the podcast, she did her ACL. So we couldn't do it. Similar story to this man, Jackson Irvine, which we were supposed to do it a few days out from Christmas. And the most bizarre story ever was like you were stuck in, was it the UK? And there was like the COVID border restrictions were going crazy. You couldn't get home. But we finally got you here, mate, in Socceroos camp, the St. Pauli midfielder. It's great to have you on.
Oh, good to see you, mate. It's been a long time, but nice to have a catch up.
I know, right? It is pretty crazy, and yeah, for those listening, we were speaking just before we jumped on. Like, we go way back, and I've been trying to find the photo of this, but the first state team you could make in Victoria was the primary school's under-12 team, and in that team in 2005 was myself, Jackson Irvine, Curtis Good, Jamie McLaren, and a bunch of other guns that obviously went on to play some pretty good level of football. But do you remember that time? Like, does that still stand out to you? Obviously, the first state team, it was kind of like playing in the Champions League at the time or something.
100%. It was massive. I'll never forget it. I remember standing around, like, you go through like all the trial gate, like you start at the very beginning, there's like hundreds, thousands, whatever, and then it filters down. I remember standing around like in that very end, like all nervous and all the boys, and we all got picked. It was just like unbelievable. It's like that first kind of, I know it was a massive deal for us at the age of 11. You know what I mean? To be someone like that, it was so good. So, and the fact that so many of us kicked on.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, and it was brutal because, like, I don't know if you remember it, but I think you touched on it. After each of like those trial sessions, the coach would stand out the front with a clipboard and say, these are the players that have made it. And you just call and you go stand on one side, and then everyone else was just standing there looking at you and they didn't make it. And you're like, whoa, ruthless, right?
We're proper ruthless, yeah, especially for kids that age. Obviously we came out of it on that side, but bloody hell, tough going.
Yeah.
To go through that age. Not great.
I know, right? Well, it probably prepared us for a little bit because the one thing I did want to share, and it's quite unique in this sense, and that's why I wanted to go into it, but the team we had at that time, Victoria, there was a lot of great players in other states that we played at the Nationals, but we had a talk mid-tournament with one of like the ex-Socceroos or representatives of the tournament, and they were just telling us like, look, we don't want to be a bit of a buzzkill, but statistically only one of you maybe from each team will make it. And I remember being like, oh God, like that's pretty severe. But then looking back in our team, there was like 5 professionals and 3 now playing for the Socceroos, which is remarkable. Yourself, Jamie and Curtis, which is pretty special.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how a lot of our careers have like intertwined from like starting back then, and how we all kind of cross paths again in later in the careers and all kind of stayed in the game. It is really unique, I suppose, out of one age group to have that many players starting, as you say, from. I think that was where like I knew Curtis from local before that, but where most of us kind of met around that time, and then as you say, we kind of played against each other and all the way through kind of until we all went pro at 16 or whatever it was. So
crazy.
Funny how it works.
I know, and to just like add some more surrealness to this situation, and before we get into the meat of this podcast, like we can't talk about the week you've just had without mentioning the game against Borussia Dortmund. So we've gone from talking about the under-12 championships to now St. Pauli beating Borussia Dortmund in the cup, which is one extreme to the other. But can you explain to us just about?
Hey, don't downplay the under-12 Victorian state team, mate. That was, there's.
New South Wales Metro
you can put it on either side.
Yeah, New South Wales Metro Victoria was one derby, but can you, mate? What a week! Like, how was the game? How was the rooms and the feeling afterwards at the club?
Yeah, unbelievable. Obviously, you go into it. Probably one of the biggest differences I've had in Germany has been the attitude towards the cups. In England, the cups are seen as the FA Cup's got such a big history, but it's almost seen as a bit of a drainer because you play so many games in the Championship, and unless you get like a really glamorous tie, It's seen as a bit of an inconvenience, but in Germany they take it so seriously, and that shows by the team. Like Dortmund came to us with a full, with their strongest 11, and for us, it's they go into it with a full belief that cup upsets can happen, and we set up like to prepare. Obviously, you're playing against one of the best teams in Europe, against arguably the best striker in the world, and you can do all the preparation you want, but three things you need. You need defend for your life. You need to run like you've never run before, and you need your goalie to have a worldie. And that's like that's just like you need all of those things to happen. And we scored after about 3 minutes, so we got off like a perfect start. And I reckon in about the 2 minutes after we scored, they had 2 1-on-1 with our keeper, and they missed them both.
Oh wow!
And then we went up the other end, and like decent ball into the box, and the guy scored an own goal. And when you kind of when the feeling when you look around, it's like it's our day. You know what I mean? Like it's all working for us, and came in, and obviously we got through, and just ridiculous, crazy experience to have been in a game like that and come out on the winning side.
Just touching on the cup, like from my understanding, I'm pretty sure obviously Dortmund's out due to your guys' work, but I'm pretty sure Bayern's out too. So it's opened up now, that cup, because some of the teams in there, like it's very level playing field as well.
Yeah, everyone's like really excited about it this season. I think it's the first year in 11 years that either Bayern or Dortmund won't be in the final. Wow. Which is pretty hectic. So yeah, it's wide open. There's 4 second league teams, 4 top division teams. Leipzig are probably the big kind of, on paper, the biggest team kind of left in. But it's going to be unbelievable. And Haasville, Hamburg, our rivals, are still in it as well. So a derby quarterfinal might be on the cards as well. So yeah, it's hectic. It's open as the cup's been in 11, 12 years. So everyone's pretty excited.
That's amazing, man. I could not believe it. Like just seeing photos of you playing against Dortmund and then winning and then talking about like the cup, and I'm like, oh my God, like it's really incredible, your rise to where you've come from. And we're going to go into your story a little bit, but I just want to focus on Germany a little bit, because you've played a large part of your career in the UK. Like how do you like living in Germany? How's life there for you?
I honestly can't speak highly enough of the experience I've had over the last 6 months since I made the switch to Germany. I think I was ready for a time in not just in my career, but in my life, to have a change, a cultural change, a football change, and it all just tied in perfectly with the opportunity to come and play for St. Pauli, which just aligns with my personality in so many ways. And fortunately, obviously on the pitch, it's clicked into place pretty well as well, which always helps.
It's a win.
Everything's gravy. Everything's gravy when you win it every week.
Yeah.
So it's easy. Sometimes it's a bit. It feels the football experience can translate into how your kind of attitude is into everything else. But you got to enjoy the good times, because in football, it's you don't get many highs like we've had in the last 6 months, and you just got to enjoy it and embrace it. And I'm learning the language, which is not easy, but
that's what I wanted to ask
crack.
you. I'm going to say it, and because I know you're an educated man, and you like doing other things outside of football, which makes you not an individual, but to me, it's something that I've really liked about you, knowing and growing up with you, is that you don't really attach yourself to just being a footballer. Like you play music. You're kind of what I would like to call a bit alternate, or a hipster in Melbourne and so forth. But I had a feeling you might be having a crack at the German language. Like, has that been difficult? Because that is a hard language to learn, by the way.
Yeah, it's difficult. My understanding is I've been quite shocked at how quickly I suppose when you're surrounded by it all the time, you do pick it up. So and we get no real coaching in English. Like he'll maybe give you a little individual instruction sometimes, but he addresses the group in German obviously all the time. So the onus is really on you to take that initiative to pick it up. And my understanding is quite good. Like I don't really need anyone to translate anything to me now, but the actual speaking and having a conversation, because grammatically and stuff, it's such a tough language.
Yeah, I can imagine. And one of the, growing up, as we touched on, and as I mentioned with Jackson playing most of his career in the UK, like you've practically been abroad your whole career. And I recall probably, I don't know how old you were when you went to Celtic, but I remember just like that period, and I've spoke to Jamie McLaren about this before, like there was that window in Australia around sort of 15 to 17, if you weren't really in the Australian Institute of Sport and the youth team sort of setup hadn't really been built as such around the A-Leagues, you didn't really have much of a choice if you wanted to be a pro. Like you had to get overseas. And coming back to your story, you obviously see what you're doing now and how glorious it is. But like everything you've got has been earned. Like without doubt, the sacrifices you made as a kid have been remarkable. But can you just give us some insight into what those early days were like, going over to a new country, going to Celtic, and obviously then not coming back home? Probably you're 28 years old.
Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a strange time in your life, and I'm sure, as you say, other players who've had similar experiences will be able to have had something similar. But as you say, I hit a certain age, and although it started all gravy at under 12 Vic State team, I kind of fell away from the representative football after that, and I kind of didn't play in any more state teams after that, and didn't go to didn't get selected to VIS or AIS or anything like that. So for me, it was kind of a different path, and it was more that I found my way into playing like senior level state team football from a younger age with Rashid at Frankston Pines.
There you go.
we had a good giggle about that on Instagram the other day. But yeah, that was my kind of path, and then from there, it was my coach at the state league level that had a connection into Celtic and the opportunity to go over on trial. And as you say, you sacrifice anything, but for me, something I've probably reflected on as I've gotten older and had a better understanding of football is how lucky I was that my background and my family, I had the opportunity for them to be able to take me over and do that. I'm sure for so many kids, those opportunities maybe are there, but they don't have the resources or the support to be able to go and do that. And I reflect now and I look at like what my family did to get me that opportunity as well, as much as my football earned me that, their side of things as well, because you can have all that ability in there.
Did they move over? Or no,
they didn't move over. They didn't move over. I don't think they ever thought I'd be there.
I love that.
I think they probably thought, oh, what's he got, a 2-year, 18-month youth team contract? Yeah. He'll be back at...
it's Celtic. He's not going to get a gig.
Yeah. He'll be back to finish year 12. That's what they told me. So, no, I think I've spoken to my parents about it, and, in the years gone by, and I think if they had the time over, they probably would have come over, especially in those early years. But yeah, no, again, going into Celtic, and I was naive, and, you're playing in Australian football, and, the big clubs. From my dad's Scottish, so I had an understanding. But until you're in that world of a club like that, just nothing really compares to it. It's insane. And even as a youth team player, I've had a pretty decent career up to this point in my life, but I still will be recognised more for playing 45 minutes for Celtic in 2012 than I will for any other contribution to any club I've played for. Yeah, I go back to Glasgow. I grew up there. I've got loads of mates there, and people will still come up to you and be like, "Oh, I remember when you made your debut, and you've gone on and had a great career. Still follow you and stuff." Like it's that world. That world of Celtic fans is unbelievable, and for someone like obviously a big Australian connection there over the years with Ange now, and Tom has been there for years, and just an unbelievable club and city, and they live and breathe it like you would not believe.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things, watching it on TV and seeing Ange have success and Celtic do so well for so long, you kind of get it, but until you're actually there. And one of the things that was most notable to me was Steven Gerrard, when he was on the other side with Rangers, but he spoke about how big it was. And I'm like, he played for Liverpool and like played at World Cups, and he still was saying like that Old Firm derby was like the craziest atmosphere and so important to people. When we look at the time at Celtic, and you mentioned your debut, you obviously went through the academy ranks and were really sort of highly rated there, because I think you did train with the first team quite a bit, despite sort of only playing the one game. What was what was sort of the lessons or the harsh lessons you got out of that experience that probably made you a better footballer and more mature in a sense as well?
Yeah, it was very difficult. It's football at a club like that is, as you know, it's as ruthless as it can be anywhere. And as a youth team player, it's so difficult to earn those opportunities, and you have to be not just outstanding, but you've got to be consistent, which is difficult for most young players. That's why the ones that do break through at these massive clubs, will go on to kind of be mainstays, because that's the most difficult thing at that time. And working with someone like Neil Lennon, who was a well documented character, we'll put it that way. And there was a lot of hard lessons. Working with someone like Scott Brown, for someone like myself, who's as most people have known me most of my life, I'll say I'm not the most like hard or intense kind of character. I'm quite
that's for sure.
Yeah. And I've kind of grown into that's probably part of me that grew while I was there, was having to be able to step up into more of a leadership position. I ended up captaining the youth sides and the reserve teams and stuff as well. And you do have to kind of embrace that, stick your chest out and be a Celtic player, because otherwise you just get eaten up. And at the end of the day, I wasn't good enough at that level. Like people say, you look back on it, like, if you got more of a chance, this and that. But I had to go out and find a different path through the game, because I was nowhere near ready for that level at that time.
Yeah, and when you touch on that, to kind of segue into it, your sort of drive to play more first team football. I think the first two clubs you went to, or the loan moves you had, was like Kilmarnock and Ross County. Mm-hmm. Was that sort of where you felt like you were more of a pro footballer, or at least started to feel like established in the game when you started playing more consecutive football in the Scottish Premier League?
Yeah, baptism of fire as well, going into like lower league, small SPL clubs, with coming from, again, I had the luckiest, but most amazing kind of integration into professional football at a massive club with unbelievable facilities, conditions and everything, just top professional. And then all of a sudden, I went on loan to Kilmarnock, who, you don't have a training ground, and you're waiting for a text in the morning that like meet at this, meet at this place. You're playing in the same league as that level, and it's like, it was just like, whoa, bring your own lunch to training kind of thing, picking up a bloody Marks and Spencer's meal deal, from the petrol station on the way to training.
God.
Like, you know what I mean? It's totally different. And I learned the hard way, because I struggled massively in my first year, especially at Killy. Getting played out of position, as you say, in a relegation battle. And, as a young loan player with a contract at Celtic, you realise, being around guys who are battling for their careers, a relegation from SPL to the Championship, for a lot of these guys, pay cuts, a different career journey for them. They might not get back to that level again. Whereas, so you realise the importance of what you're playing for every week in those games. That was probably the best thing I learned from that. And then when I went to Ross County, it was where I kind of probably grew into myself more as a player, rather than, probably an understanding of the game kind of changed a bit as well. So, yeah, definitely it was a big, massive learning experience, those two loans.
I can imagine. Well, it's incredible, because when you think about your story, probably some of those times are a little bit forgotten now for some people, obviously not yourself and people close to you, but those sort of periods where you had to really earn your stripes and playing in one of the toughest leagues in the world in regards to physicality and, as you said, the meaning to the fans and the people in Scotland is it's a different level. Was Ross County, or was it after where you got your opportunity to come into Socceroo camp for the first time?
So I actually did get my first call up when I was at Killy, but that was that was probably more off the back of the Under-20 World Cup, which we had that summer, and I had a really good tournament, and I'd gone back, played a few senior games, a few pre-season games with Celtic, and then gone on loan, and that was where I got my first call up into the Socceroos at that time. I do think there was probably, I had played Scotland Under-19s kind of up to that point, just through my place over there, and I think there was probably a little bit of that, as we've seen with players in the past, cap him, make sure he doesn't,
James McLaren's the same.
Yeah, make sure we get him. And then, I came in, played that game, then it was a couple of years until I became more of a regular after that.
Yeah. I actually recall, like, watching you quite a little bit, or just watching over you in the UK, because I think after that period you moved to England, and for anyone knows, like, Jackson's career in the UK, like, it was stellar. I mean, playing at Burton Albion and of course Hull City, where you spent, you know, a majority of your time. But the Championship football is like, it's a different world of a league. I mean, I think it's like the 4th most watched league in the world as well. So it's highly entertaining, but the high pace, the energy around it, like, did you have to adjust to that at all when you went from Scotland, or were you able to kind of just get straight into it and hit the ground running?
I think the move that I made to Burton was probably the best thing I could have done. You know, my second season at Ross County was like huge success for the club. Like, we finished 4th or 5th in the league, won the club's first major trophy. You know, that was like a massive achievement for the club at the time, obviously at the time, and moving from there to Burton, which is probably a club of a similar size, massively overachieving, had gone back-to-back promotions, League Two, League One, and kind of got caught off guard, and all of a sudden found himself in the Championship, you know, with a squad of guys who were 2 seasons before playing in the 4th division, you know what I mean? Mental. And, you know, I came in as the club's record signing for 250 grand. You know what I mean? Like, this is, you know what I mean? Wolves were signing Ruben Neves from Porto, like, and, you know, and Burton are bringing in this kid from Ross County as the record signing. So this was like the level of where the club was at. So, you know, this is, you're playing against top international players, and you know, this is where, as I say, where the club was at. It kind of just found themselves in the Championship after a couple of amazing seasons. So it came in with no pressure, you know, like, in the sense that it was like, we signed some great like guys kind of at the back end of their careers, like Lloyd Dyer, Ben Turner, guys who played in the Premier League who were probably in their mid-30s at that time. And, you know, for me to be around guys like that who have played at the top level, but we just had like a total freedom almost to just go out and just give it a crack, you know, like it was, and we survived. We like stayed up and pretty comfortably in the end, which was just a massive achievement for the club. And, you know, my individual season was got me kind of the chance to progress again and move on to Hull. So yeah, although the step up in footballing level was really big, for myself, being in that environment is probably the best thing could have happened for me.
Yeah, was your time at Hull, was that something memorable? I mean, you were kind of like a bit of a fan favourite there, and also like Hull, being obviously my background being from the UK and having gone to Hull before, it's a massive club. Like, it's a huge club, great stadium, great facilities. I mean, was that sort of period for you? I felt like you were probably maturing in your age and your career as well with the Socceroos. Did you kind of feel like now you can really sort of put your force and emphasis on the game and sort of become the player that you've become?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it just, everything just fell kind of into as like the natural progression for me of playing in Scotland, doing well, getting that move to England, to the Championship, and then, you know, at that point, you know, I was 24, 23, 24, and, you know, the next step is you want to not just, you know, establish yourself as a Championship player, but you want to progress again. And Hull had just come down from the Premier League. We're still stacked with Premier League players, Michael Dawson, Abel Hernandez, Sebastian Larsson, like,
top players.
You know, Takayo Tomori was on loan from Chelsea, who's now AC Milan. Like, we had an unbelievable squad, and you know, for me again to then progress into that environment was just another huge step up on the day-to-day level of the kind of players around you and the expectation of the club. As you say, it's a one-club city. Hull, probably one of the only one-club cities in the UK.
Yeah.
So, you know, all the eyes are on you there, and although the fans and probably the biggest disappointment of my time there was that the relationship between the owners and the fans had really deteriorated around that time,
right.
And we probably didn't have the same energy around the club after the relegation from the Premier League, and you know, to try and get back to that level, probably there was just a few ingredients missing, and I think we did have too big a gap of players who had played at the highest level and young, kind of motivated players, but we didn't quite get the balance right. But for myself, it was, as I said, I played 3 seasons there, over 100 games, and probably, you know, to spend that time at a club like that, although it didn't end in the best way possible during COVID and contractual disputes.
Yeah.
But that's football. That happens everywhere. And,
Yeah.
I feel like I had a big contribution to the place with the time I spent there.
Have you gotten used to, I guess, the business of football? You talk about like contractual disputes and things going on off the field with fans and owners. Like, is that, I take it, maybe that's not a world that you really love, but at the same time, is it something you've just had to get used to and kind of just put your chest out and get on with it? Or
it's a bit of both. I've always found it difficult to accept, not only just because the business side of it can be so ruthless and so, it's difficult to put into words. I just, in any industry, in any business, you just want to be treated with respect and that you have value and that I didn't feel at the end of that, my time there, it didn't feel like my contributions and what I had given to the club was being respected at that level. You know what I mean? It was a purely business decision. And at the end of the day, I was something I did have to accept, that was just the way it came to an end. It was purely on through any kind of personal relationship that I built with them.
Right.
And, that's tough to take for someone like myself who, I throw my heart and soul into everywhere I go, and you want to be a part of not just the club, but the community. And, I met my partner in Hull, and, I had built a kind of, good relationship with the city as well. And to see it kind of collapse in the way it did at the end, it still doesn't really sit right with me. But it's, as you say, that's it's part of the game that players, we just have to do kind of grow, learn and accept. And the business of the game is what's kind of projected football into this different stratosphere that we know, nowadays. And it's tough. It isn't always what you want to be a part of, but it's just the way the game that is nowadays.
It's interesting because in football sometimes things, they happen and you kind of don't understand the reason why. But I feel like this next phase of your career, you look back and you're like, well, maybe some things do happen for a reason, because coming over to Germany and St. Pauli, obviously they're such a well-recognised club globally, and not just because of on the field, and they've got a cool kit that I absolutely love, by the way, but the global stance they have on social issues. And you mentioned that, it's quite a good fit for you before when you were talking about it. Are you able to give, the listeners that aren't fully aware of the club you're playing for and some of the sort of, I guess, the societal issues and the things that they have around the club, the branding, what they sort of push into, I guess, the stratosphere of football, which is very unique. Are you able to give us a bit of insight into that around the club?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that the club, the ethos and identity of the club is built around that very idea what you talked about there, which is that a lot of people talk about politics and sport and the fact that they don't mix, and that is just the kind of opposite of what St. Pauli is all about. And a lot of it's not even politics; it's just promoting basic human rights. You know what I mean? They are very anti-fascist first and foremost. That's what a lot of the club was built on in in Germany and in Europe. And in years gone by, football hooliganism has been very closely related to nationalistic views, and a lot of people in Hamburg and throughout Germany, didn't like the direction that that kind of football hooliganism was moving into, I guess. And St. Pauli was just, it represents the very opposite of that. It's an inclusive space. It's a somewhere that doesn't just stand idly by and support things here and there. They live and breathe these values, and it's pasted on the walls, it's plastered in the streets. As you say, it's part of the very fabric of what the club means, and through that they've built really good relationships with a lot of other clubs throughout Europe who have tried to embrace that kind of similar idea. And for myself personally, they have a very close relationship with Celtic as well. I'd actually been to St. Pauli as a Celtic during a pre-season tour in Germany when I was younger, and I think that kind of me understanding that about the club already made it such an easy decision to go and be a part of it.
Yeah, it's pretty unique. It must be refreshing to play, at the highest level for a club that's got traditions that stand firmly against racism, as you said, fascism, sexism, homophobia. Like, it's a pretty awesome environment. And you touched on some of the stuff that's plastered around the stadium and around the city. But I just wanted to read one quote that I think it's a poster on the stadium. We don't have silverware. Instead, we have something a lot better. We have a story to tell. The incredible story of how a community-based club from Hamburg becomes one of the most famous football teams in Europe without big trophies, without big money. That's pretty cool. Like, very unique. I don't know many clubs that have that sort of view on football, because very much so, as we touched on, it's a business. For a lot of clubs where they want to win, they want to drive revenue, they don't care how they do it, etc.
Yeah, for myself, like, as I say, coming off probably that experience of my departure from Hull, and then the other side of football business, which is, then when I spent 6 months, nearly 10 months without a club, due to other football business related industries like agents and etc. and things like that, and to kind of navigate my way back into this space from there is, as you say, some things I suppose you have to look at it. The path is kind of falls into place for a reason, and for St. Pauli, I suppose, of all these things that are so great about the team off the pitch as well, and I think what we found this season is that blend of being able to bring those like that feeling of the club and what it represents in the world, but also at the end of the day, I still want to play in the national team. I want to play at the highest level. I'm still so motivated. That was still a massive part of the decision to go there, and the conversations I had with coach and sporting director, and being able, having that understanding of balance of what you can bring to the club off the pitch and contributions in a footballing sense is the reason I think we've had such success this season already.
It's incredible. And just one on a bit of a lighter note around the club, which is even more, it's probably one of the best things I've ever read in football. And I spoke to Vince Rugari, actually, one of the great football journalists in this country, for the Sydney Morning Herald, and he actually put out a tweet, and it must have been after an interview with you. But in that tweet, you were quoted talking about a particular game that St. Pauli had a great game. They won. I think they were on the bus back home, and you might have pulled over. I think it was a little town in Bavaria. And this is a professional club we're talking about. Nutrition, health, it's number one. But, St. Pauli, they've pulled over in this little town, and they've popped up at a very famous little kebab shop. And the squad's on the side of the street, apparently, just eating kebabs. Like, is that a true story? Did that actually happen?
True story, mate. Yeah, we just played Heidenheim, and I think I don't know if it was when we the first time we went top of the league, but we were top of the league, second Bundesliga at the time, and we're on the way back. Obviously, great result. We're on our way back to the airport, and the bus just pulls over in this village, and everyone just like piles into this kebab shop, mate, and like we were just like sitting on. I was just like sitting on the curb on like the street outside with like a beer beside me, eating a kebab in my trackie, like after the game, just like in this little place. I was like, this is class. I was like, this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. I was like, I don't know many other clubs in the world that you could, this, and no one even, I think the best thing about it was that no one was even like surprised by it. Like, no one even thought like, oh, this is crazy. Like, this is like some weird thing to do. Everyone was just like, oh yeah, we do stuff like this all the time.
Oh wow, mate, what a place to be playing football. If we dip back into, obviously you've been playing for the Socceroos for a long time. You've been associated with Australian football for a long time. Now I know the PFA is a pretty important space for you because you've always been around it with the Socceroos. You've always been around the messaging. I think there's a lot of similarities in your views of how the game should be run, and situations within the game that the PFA obviously resolve and support, and the mantra that they have. It was announced sort of towards the end of last year that you joined the illustrious PFA executive, which is a pretty special thing for footballers around the game to be associated with, but also just to be on the exec. It's a big thing looking at the past players that have done it and the impact they've had on the game. Can you speak to us a little bit about the role of what the PFA exec does and potentially how you came into, I guess, wanting to be a part of that and how that happened?
Yeah, it's been kind of, again, part of my kind of growth as a player and a person, I guess. And as you say, I've been so lucky in my Socceroos career to be around, the players who have been in these roles before, but I'm working with the PFA closely over the years and seeing the positive impact that they can have on the game and, on and off the field in our country and for players based overseas. And, to have the opportunity to be a part of that and as I say, as the game is evolving and changing, and it's so exciting to be working with people who have such a clear identity of where they see footballers and the path for the game in our country. And for me to have a small part of that as a part of the executive, have a small voice at the moment, and it's something I'm very keen to grow into, and encouraging players to be more active on social issues is a massive part of it as well. But the growth of the game on and off the field in the country is the priority, and we've seen with the Women's World Cup coming in, and the Matildas on an amazing form in the Asian Cup as well as the Socceroos, and the amazing performances from the boys at the Olympics, and we're in such a good space at the moment, and as I say, to play a small part in that at the moment is just so exciting. And they say I'm something that's still relatively new to me, but a role I'm really keen to grow into.
That's awesome. Do you have you might obviously develop this as you go, given you're sort of early into it, as you said, but do you have a sort of view of maybe the impact you'd like to make, across that position? Is that something you're sort of still building in yourself, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's still something within myself, as I say, it's as a player that's still playing overseas, and not probably, I think myself and Maddie, not spending as much time in Australia as a lot of it's more difficult to probably do things at ground level. But yeah, to be involved in the messaging that we want to have amongst players, and being in a supportive role for the younger players that are playing overseas is something I'd like to do as well, having been through kind of my pathway as well. So as I say, it's something I'm still kind of learning and growing into as well. But I would say definitely encouraging players to be more active on social issues is something that's really driven me into this role as well.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe it's probably a good segue to touch on this, because I was going to, and we will speak about, I guess, your Socceroos journey a little bit, because there's some things about the Socceroos world that I'd love to know, because never been a Socceroo, and you're obviously in the Australian top there in camp at the moment. So we'll get some questions on that. But just speaking on, I guess, some of the social issues, and you've played at World Cups before, you've experienced some of these major tournaments with, that it doesn't get much bigger than that. Obviously, Qatar is coming up and around the corner in some regards, and the qualification process is well underway for most nations. I guess for you, and you've been quite outspoken on some of the issues, the social issues of Qatar, and for those that don't know, obviously, it's well documented everywhere, and you'll probably hear Jackson just touch on a little bit. But when did you start taking it, I guess, an active interest, or come across some of the challenges and I guess some of the social issues that was built around the development of the World Cup there?
I think a lot of people were kind of aware of it from like the earliest time of the announcement of the World Cup being there. But as we all know in the world, things then start to you move on for years go by, and then it's obviously people have been trying to make these changes over a long period, but I think it was over the last few years when these major reports have come out, and we've seen the kind of, unfortunately, sometimes it can come when statistics start to come out, and you can see genuinely, like in black and white, how this is affecting people in certain ways, that it drives people to talk about the issue more seriously. And as players, there's been some amazing work done by a lot of players speaking out over the last couple of years as well. I know the German and Danish national teams did early doors, and the captain of Finland as well has been very outspoken on the issue. And I think, again, it's kind of tied into probably where I am in my life, my growth as a player and a person, that has made me realise that, especially as someone who plays in Asia, we've done a lot of games, played a lot of games in Qatar, that we have a real impact, a real footprint on the country, and our presence in the country directly affects the people who are being exploited. And for us, I think it's important that we have a real understanding of what that means and how we can affect it with lasting change, but as well as take care of, when we do go into those places, that we know exactly what it is that our presence there is doing.
Is that something you sort of see the Socceroos, as much as the main aim is to get to the World Cup and qualify and have a great tournament? Is there an element of, like, I guess the brand of the Australian national team feels a bit of a responsibility to kind of have a view or to share their thoughts around this? Because as we touched on, it's pretty crazy what's going on there at times.
Mm. Yeah, I hope so. It's been great to see the engagement we've had from the players, from the men and women's national teams have really engaged on the issue, and we've had meetings with Amnesty. And I suppose the first step is education. We need to have a real clear understanding of what's going on. As players, we're probably not. Sometimes it's difficult to get a real grasp on what it is, what is actually going on until you have the people who, as you say, have been working on these issues for years and have a real understanding of how laws and things change, and how it's not just about building stadiums. It's about, as you say, as soon as you touch down in these countries, the majority of the workforce in Qatar is built of migrant workers, and that's from the airport to the hotel to the, everything that you do once you get there is affecting this population. And
sorry to interrupt, but is that one of the main things that was sort of seen as the issues, was like the workers' rights? Obviously, there's been deaths around the developments of stadiums. Like that's sort of what you're referencing, right? Just for the listeners.
Yeah, 100%. And there's been a lot of other issues as well with exploitation in terms of they had a system over there called the kafala system, where basically businesses were stopping workers being able to even return home or leave those jobs, and were not being paid and not being allowed to unionize, so that they can even the workers have not been unable to kind of even take responsibility into their own hands in terms of wanting to make those changes for themselves. So there's a number of issues that need to be addressed, and as players, I think we have a unique voice and position to be able to draw attention to these issues as well. And it's a sensitive one, but it's not about pointing fingers and in a certain way. It's just about this is the change that is possible, and these are the pathways to being able to do it. And I think it's something that I hope will continue to be pressed on post World Cup and into the future. It's not something that we just want to shine a light on and over the next year and then will disappear once the World Cup leaves, because these issues are long lasting, and you want lasting change is the most important thing.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think people like yourself, Jackson, in our game is only positive, and the future of the PFA and also football in this country with, as I said, people like yourself, Matty Ryan, and the rest of the execs, where I think we're in very good hands, as the listeners will listen into. But I just want to jump into, I guess, the Socceroos world now, because that's what's relevant. It's where we are. You're from Melbourne, and we touched on as well before we jumped on, like, you haven't been in Australia or Melbourne, I say specifically, for like 3 or 4 years. You mentioned you're in, obviously, the COVID protocols, so you can't exactly go home, even though because you're a Melbourne boy, but you're here. I mean, does it feel pretty awesome to be back?
Oh yeah, listen, it's obviously, as you say, it's unique circumstances. I haven't been, I was saying to you off camera before that it's my first time in Australia, let alone Melbourne in Australian summer in 11 years.
Wow.
Normally our break falls in the June, so I'm always here in the depths of winter. So to be here and experience a bit of Australian summer is absolutely glorious. But obviously the downside is that we're in a kind of bubble situation, so not being able to catch up with family and friends. But we are here to do a job, and my family will come to the game, and I'll be able to kind of see them from the pitch. And as you say, it's not ideal, but a lot of people have faced much worse circumstances over the last couple of years. So it's I'm sure I'll get the chance to come back and do Melbourne properly as soon as I can.
No doubt, mate. No doubt. It'll always be home, I'm sure, in one way, shape or another. But for those listening, like myself and many others that have never donned the Socceroos jersey, never been in a Socceroos camp, are you able, and this might be a bit more unique of a camp given sort of the COVID regime and so forth, but are you able to give us a bit of insight into what a camp's like, how the sort of build up towards a game is as a Socceroos player?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Staff here are incredible. The preparation, not just in terms of tactically and technically on the field, but the support staff, everything that's done. We've got boys that have landed at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night. They're going to have less than 48 hours to prepare for a game after playing on the weekend and then traveling across the world. And the medical and, as I say, across the board, the preparation is just top level. Everything's in place for us to be able to perform, and the environment itself is such a joy. It is a real family environment. There's people here who you've known for 8-9 years now, and we've got such good relationships with, and that kind of feeling makes it so comfortable for the younger players and players who are coming in for the first time to really just ease into it. And it's not an intimidating environment. I feel like everyone who comes in straight away is comfortable, and it's such a joy to be a part of. And it's not, I think our clubs don't love it, obviously, with us having to fly around the world, play a couple of games, and come back. Yeah, exactly. But for us, it's every time's a pleasure. And you say we have such good relationships. You say, guys like Jamie, who I've known since I was a kid, and we'd obviously play on opposite sides of the world now, but to come into here and be able to catch up, have a coffee, and then go out and be on the pitch together. It's just so good. It's so good.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you can't really compare that to anything, can you? But I mean, for you, and you can obviously see you're in your hotel room now. I mean, there's probably a lot of downtime as well, as much as the energy into tactics and training and team meetings. Is there a sort of a way you keep yourself busy on Socceroo camps, or when you're sort of playing away from home at times? I know you're into your music and so forth, but is there anything that you kind of do to keep your brain sort of stimulated? Or
yeah, to be fair, it's one of them, especially in these environments where normally if we were here and like just now, we've had lunch at 1:00, and then your next meeting's not till maybe 5 until we train in the evening. You know what I mean? Normally it would be right. Let's go into Melbourne. Let's go for a walk through Albert Park and go and get a coffee, and or catch up with someone. So as you say, it's unique circumstances being stuck in a hotel room instead. But you've just got to get through it the way you can. And I brought my German books with me. I'm doing a little bit of a little bit of study on the way as well. Can you
give us anything? Can you give us any German, like some basic? Let's just hear the pronunciation you've got.
Oh God, you probably under the tongue there as well. I can't even say. I feel every time I speak to my German teacher, I feel like she's just laughing at me. I was actually laughing because I was speaking with Brandon Borello before, because he's been in Germany nearly 5 years now, and he speaks fluent. He doesn't need any kind of he's like totally comfortable in it and everything. And I was just talking about me in my first few months here, and I'll go to a cafe or a restaurant, and I'll give it a go, and I'll order in German, and they just reply to you in English, and it's just like, oh God,
that is hurting the morale.
It's so demoralizing. It is. It's like I've come all this way. I'm like trying really hard, but they love it. They love speaking English, and they a lot of younger people, especially, they use it as a chance to practice their English in some circumstances. So. Yeah, there's probably nothing more demoralizing than when you try and start a conversation in German and they just reply to you in English. So, wow.
Oh gosh, well, I tell you what, Jackson Irvine, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the PFA podcast, The Footballer's Voice. I mean, somewhat you kind of had to come on the PFA exec, so I feel like we twisted your arm a little bit easier. But
hung on there today.
Yeah, but no, in all honesty, as I said, the game's in great hands. Absolute wonderful football that you spoke about those state teams where you didn't make towards any. I mean, it was a no-brainer. Jackson Irvine should have been in those teams, and it's completely justified now watching you play for the Socceroos and obviously St. Pauli. But more importantly, off the field, wonderful person, man, and really looking forward to seeing what you can achieve on both parts going forward. So thank you for coming on the show, mate.
Oh, mate, my pleasure. Anytime.
Cheers. Beautiful.